is the Victorian Country Hour with Warwick Long on ABC Radio Victoria.
Well, we warned you it was on the way. You knew it was coming, but that doesn't make it any easier when major storms, hail and wind arrive across Victoria, leaving in their wake a trail of destruction to crops, to private property, to cars, to houses as well. We'd love to know what's happened where you are. Have you survived okay? Has it left damage at your place? 1300 977 222 if you'd like to call us. 1300 977 222. You're going to hear the sound big hail made when it hit a hay shed roof at Kaniva on the border with South Australia soon in the program, and we'll talk about the damage that's been left behind. Love to know what's happened where you are, though. 1300 977 222 to give us a ring here on the Country Hour. You can text as well, 0467 842 722. If you've got a pic, a video, send it through, 0467 842 722. Huge agribusiness news in just a moment too, and I'm going to sound like a broken record, but we have more records to talk about. More record cattle prices tumbled, indicators setting more records, not just the usual ones right across the sphere of cattle being sold across the country this week as well. We'll take you through some of those numbers. We've got the rural muster. We'll have the full weather report and news updates as well. Strap yourself in. There's a lot happening today in the Country Hour.
The Victorian Country Hour with Warwick Long on ABC Radio Victoria.
Let's start with some pretty major agribusiness news. Central Victorian chicken meat producer Hazeldene's has been sold to a private equity firm, BGH Capital. Both Hazeldene's and BGH are not ready to speak to the media, but it's understood the sale involves the $200 million in assets, including 11 breeder farms, a hatchery and a processing plant at Lockwood near Bendigo. The family business started in 1938 and grew to become one of the 5 largest chicken meat producers in Australia, selling more than 75 million kilograms of chicken a year. And it's understood by ABC Rural that the family has retained a stake in the business. But just to repeat, Hazeldene's has sold to private equity firm BGH Capital. As soon as we hear from the companies or we know more, we'll bring that to you on the Country Hour. But Hazeldene's has been sold, and big news coming through in agribusiness this Friday on the Country Hour. Now we'll take you to the weather, which we spent a lot of time talking about going through South Australia yesterday. We heard about it going through Western Australia before that. Well, it arrived in a big way yesterday afternoon in Victoria. Major hail, big winds right across the state. Hailstorms in Western Victoria, huge winds, including right now through areas of Gippsland and the surrounds too. So if you've got a weather report to tell us, we'd love to hear it. 1300 977 222 to call. Send a text 0467 842 722. But listen to this moment. It's the moment hail quite literally crossed the border, the South Australian Victorian border, and hit Simon Finlayson's place at Kaniva.
Here it comes.
Don't adjust your radio. That's hail. That's hail going onto the shed at Simon Finlayson's. And it is serious hail. Well, the man who captured that video has been good enough to speak to me earlier today. Simon Finlayson, welcome to the Country Hour. You're a large, open-faced shed watching the clouds roll in. Why did you choose that moment to start filming?
Very surprising. Well, to an extent, we knew it's going to be a sort of day. I grabbed my phone out because there was just this huge roar coming across the paddocks from the northeast direction. So at the time, couldn't 100% tell what it was. Thought it might have been like a massive windstorm because there was wind in the mid-north and that sort of thing, whether that was coming around or not. wasn't sure. So thought, yeah, we'll start recording this, and then she was on.
And it sounds loud. What was it like to be standing there and hearing that hit your roof?
Surprising, confusing for the first one, and I'd be honest, my hand was shaking halfway through it. I don't know if you can see that in the video or not, but yeah, you're just going, wow, what's this doing to everything?
How big was the hail when you finally got the courage to walk out and have a look at it?
Yeah, well, one down into my feet, which picked up and chucked back out in the yard, which would have been, that would have been 50 mil across, I suppose, or just under that. The very first few that came through were huge. So those first big bangs on the roof were big ones, and then as the front of it went past, they tended to get smaller in shape. They didn't seem to have real jagged edges, which is the real when they start tearing crops up.
Yeah, and how long did the hail last for? Obviously, we got a full minute of it in your video.
Yeah. Well, there's a bit there. So I initially drove straight out from the back of that shed to check wheat paddocks, which quick look appeared okay, and then I went looking at canola. That seems to have hung onto the pod, as is quite green, and in the pod still, so it's hanging on. But beans are knocked pods off and knocked the pod, split them open and torn some crop to pieces, but not totally bad. I don't know yet. I'll go keep looking.
Because there's a serious side to this, isn't it? Like hail at this time of year can be disastrous and can cost you a lot of money as a grower. So I'd imagine you're thinking about all of that at the time too.
Yeah, that's right. And it's frost is the first thing off the list. We appear to have dodged that, although and there's plenty of people not far from us that are knocking wheat crops down because of frosting, and to the north into lighter country, the canola's touched up pretty bad. We sort of escaped that one. Then these, talking to mates at Clare and over at Maitland, because we've heard it gone through Maitland. No, it's missed us. We're not doing too bad. The town copped it, and the other blokes are like, no, it was windy as, but our eco shelters are still standing. And how are you faring down there? No, job's good at the moment. And then an hour later, she's on.
But so far, you think you've got through okay? Is that fair enough to say?
Yeah, maybe in another half an hour, I'll tell you the truth.
Are you nervous to look today, in all seriousness?
No. It is what it is. We can't change it. We've got to deal with it. So we'll go and have a look. And, yeah, I've got the policy number out and the phone ready. So there'll be a claim. I'm sure there'll be a claim on the beans. I just need to go and double-check wheat and the canola and make sure everything else is okay. So we did a little bit of other damage, in dents on bonnets and roofs of a couple of utes, a windscreen on a car, but that's nothing big. We can deal with that.
So, and you had insurance for your crops?
Yeah, absolutely. We're still insuring every. Not very often we get to claim on hail, which we're the only option's hail and fire. We don't like to see fire, that's for sure. So we don't like to see hail either, but at least we've got cover for it. Have
you chatted to many others in the region to see sort of how widespread this hailstorm was?
Yes and no. It appears to have been a bit of a band from here through to Nil. I think there's a bit of in the middle on the other side of Coniva. I don't know if anyone's absolutely got big ones there. So just on the other side of the lowlights, and then it's stripped down inside of the border here. But that's best I can sort of work out at this stage. But I think everyone's got a bit, but to what extent, I'm not 100% sure.
And just before we let you go, Simon, to give everybody an idea of the timing of it all, just how close were you to starting harvest, or are you to starting harvest?
Grain harvest is still a good month off at least, or a bit more. We haven't windrowed any canola yet, so we're a week or two thereabouts off windrowing canola, and then that's got to lay down for a bit, and then that'll be on. So hay time, now we've dropped all the hay bar one block of oats for export, so we'll just winging that one, let it stand for a few more days, letting this front pass through, and see if we could get some hay without rain on it. I managed to get one paddock of vetch baled in the shed the night before, which was pushing the system to the absolute max, but we've got green vetch hay in the shed. Not a lot of it, but it's a start.
And have you ever seen hail like that before, or experienced being out in hail like that before?
Yeah, once a fair while ago. It came through Bordertown, not just over the border from us. I was working as a mechanic then, so you could hear it coming that time too. That's the only other time I've heard it come like that. But that was coming across the town, and you expect to hear roofs, and that was loud coming through. So, and that one did a lot more damage on cars in town. That was a long time ago though.
Yeah, that doesn't happen too often. Well, thank you for filming it for us anyway. It gives us an idea of just how loud it was. But we hope when you're out checking around this afternoon that, the news is better than hoped.
No, excuse the language.
Simon, good to talk to you.
Thanks, mate.
Simon Finlayson there at Kaniva over near the South Australia-Victoria border. Well, pretty much on it, and had the biggest hailstorm that I've sort of seen recorded. The sound is just incredible. If you want to see that video, go to the ABC Rural Facebook page, or you can just look up Simon on Twitter if that's where you are for social media as well. But we've got it up there now, and you can turn the sound on and have a listen again. It's absolutely incredible. I might play a bit more later on in the Country Hour. Well, it wasn't just there where hail was hitting and wild weather was as well. For the second night in a row, wild weather in the northwest of Victoria. Milawa farmer Nigel Charles has been out assessing the damage at his property, which is west of Werrimal and north of Bamble, and he spoke with Deborah Pearce about what he found.
The storm passed through about 5:30, 6 o'clock last night, I suppose. She was pretty violent. There was a fair bit of hail. Hail would have lasted for a good 5 minutes, I suppose, or more. We were in the machinery shed, and the noise was deafening in the machinery shed.
That'd be really full on. How big was the hail?
Yeah, most of it was probably around that 5-cent piece size, but we found a few pieces that were nearly as big as golf balls.
Wow. And has it caused much damage?
Yeah, it's definitely damaged some crops. I've probably driven around half of the paddocks that have got into crop and had a bit of a look, and yeah, I'd say there's up to 20% crop damage in places.
Oh, that's pretty intense. Is it something that happens very often this time of year?
Oh, I suppose this is the time of year when we expect a few storms and stuff, but not much we can do about it.
Yeah, what are other farmers in the Milawa telling you? Have they had much damage?
Yeah, I've heard other stories of damage in different areas. Back in at Pelder, I heard there's some crop that was pretty well wiped out, but that's only hearsay, so I'm not 100% sure.
Is it something that farmers in the region have insurance for to cover hail damage?
Yeah, you can insure for hail damage, yep, for sure.
No good though, 20% is quite a lot. Now, Nigel, when are you likely to start harvest?
Probably later on next week at this stage.
Well, I'm sorry to hear about the damage, but you seem to quite resigned to it, Nigel. You seem like you're just going to roll with the punches.
Yeah, not much we can do about it. It's part of farming, I suppose. We deal with the weather every day of the year, so just take it as it comes.
Yeah, rough. Now, you've had some pretty tough years in the Milawa recently. How are you feeling heading into harvest in the next season?
Our crops were probably looking like the average sort of yield this year, and prices aren't looking too bad, so we were, upbeat about harvest and, looking forward to getting into it. And, next year, input costs are spiralling at the moment, going up, and, that could make things a bit interesting, but hopefully the grain prices stay up as well.
That's Milawa farmer Nigel Charles there speaking with Deborah Pearce. Some of your texts coming in, 0467 842 722. You can call too if you'd like, 1300 977 222. 32 millimetres here at Croxton East with a little bit of hail, but no real damage on farm. Only a couple of small limbs down, says William. Thank you very much for that text, William. Jono on the borderline says, all we get now is mostly big dumps of rain. I had 12 millimetres in 5 minutes and small hail for 30 seconds after the rain. Cheers, Jono on the borderline. He sent a photo, 16 millimetres to 9 a.m. of, I suppose you'd call that marble-sized hail sitting next to an old Coke can for size comparison. Jono, thank you for that. Really, it's good to see the visual with it as well, but hopefully there's not too much damage. Let us know if you find any. And Carolina has sent a photo of Point Ritchie at Warrnambool, which looks quite wild today as well. Fair bit of action out on the waves there too. Thank you for sending that through. 0467 842 722 if you'd like to send a text. Tom has just tweeted to me with a text saying, we had these little gems hit us yesterday evening, then 80 kilometre an hour winds plus 16 millimetres of rain. Doesn't say where you're from, Tom, but got a teaspoon with a pile of hailstones, and they're all about the size of the head of the teaspoon. Really? Quite large hail sitting there. Some of it has that sort of jagged edges that Simon was talking about. He was a little bit worried about as well. So pretty serious stuff there. If you have anything to share or a weather report, let us hear it. We might even talk a bit more widely now about some of the damage and what it's looking like out there, with crop losses of more than 20% are expected in some areas from last night's hailstorms. And the worst damage was probably done by the smaller hailstones rather than by the large golf ball-sized stones. That's according to West Wimmera-based crop loss assessor Marty Colbert, who's expecting assessors to be run off their feet for the next few weeks. He says damage reports are coming in all the way from the South Australian Mallee to the southern Wimmera.
We're starting to get reports trickle in as claims from areas of Loxton through the Mallee, in through the Wimmera and the southern Wimmera down as far as Harrow.
And Marty, hail events can often be very isolated, but that is a very large area.
Yeah, it is quite a large area, and I think the bomb radar site would have been the most watched site on record yesterday. Keen observers of it will have seen that it was some pretty heavy cells moving down through there, so there'll be specific areas that have copped more of a brunt than others, and also crop maturity has a bit to do with it as well. So those more mature mallee crops won't have fared as well as a green crop on a slope at nice green slope at Harrow.
So in terms of damage, golf ball size seems to be a pretty common descriptor for some of the larger stuff. So if a crop has been hit with golf ball sized hail, what sort of damage are you expecting?
When there's golf ball size hail, it's pretty serious size. But to be honest, I'd prefer a golf ball than one golf ball than a heap of buckshot. The golf ball will come through, and there's generally not as many of them, and what it hits it will destroy, but it's a little bit more localised. So more getting down to, which will be more common size, will be, we'll say, marble size and smaller, and that's what's sort of come through just west of Nil. It's knocked heads off of wheat, it's knocked pods off of canola, it's destroyed entire pods off the plant, taken out big segments of barley heads, and even smaller than that is still enough to have bruised the canola seeds within the pod. There'll be all ranges of impact from even the smaller than golf ball size and cricket ball size hailstones.
Okay, so obviously you've still got to get out there and do your assessments, but just from anecdotally from what you're hearing, could you give me a rough figure on the worst end of what sort of yield loss we could be talking about?
Yeah, well, I've had a quick scout around a couple of paddocks I'm involved with west and southwest of Nil, and from a very quick inspection, I'd say that we'd be looking at figures of 20%, and there could be more than that once the assessment actually happens within the paddock.
Marty, you mentioned that the greener crops are less susceptible than the riper crops, and this does seem to generally be a fairly late season and things are still greener than they may traditionally be. So I guess maybe fortunate in that circumstance. Yeah,
we're definitely fortunate there. The canola, which is a great indicator of how much it's one of the more susceptible crops, the pods are way too green to shatter. They've more been dislodged wholly.
What's the process for you as an assessor? What do you look for, and how do you determine, or how is it determined what farmers are entitled to?
Just to take it back a step to before I assess a paddock, it's how the claim is lodged, and that's something I'd like to touch on. The farmer will lodge his claim for his insured crop, and it'll be commonplace on policies that farmers hold for a map to be supplied of the paddock and a rough estimate of the impact to the crop, and whether it be light, heavy, moderate, none, and that goes through to the broker when the claim is lodged, and then the broker forwards it on to the assessor, which will, in this instance, will be me, and I will speak to the farmer over the phone and give an approximate date and time when I'll be there, and then I'll enter the paddock and begin a routine assessment across the whole paddock, because when you insure a paddock, you insure it as a whole. So it's the average result of the impact across a representative number of sites within the paddock.
Okay, so you're needing to assess what yield reduction there's been, I suppose.
That's correct. What loss has been incurred by the impact that has been insured for. So to give an example of wheat, I'll pick out a metre of row. I'll go along and I'll count how many tillers are there. I'll just use an easy number. There's 100 tillers there. I'll calculate what the average head size was, and let's say that was 38. And then I'll go back through that number of heads, the 100 heads, and I will, using a tally counter, I will count up how many grains are lost, and I will then calculate that as a percentage. And then I'll move on to another part of the paddock. Let's say if there's a 100-hectare paddock, I'll do 5 samples like that, and I'll come out at the other end of it with a figure of a loss.
And the insurance policy will make up the difference between the tonnage that was insured for and the tonnage that you would predict as a result of the hail damage.
Yep, that's a pretty broad way of explaining it. Some policies have different variations, but the way you've described it is pretty much how it works.
And also, Marty, as part of the process, important that farmers, when it does come to harvest, that they record their actual yields?
Certainly is. If farmers can keep a record of the tonnage they get out of impacted paddock, and also if they are able to supplement that with any calibrated yield data, is always a handy thing. And before I finish up, I'd just like to mention that assessors will be operating under COVID safe plans. So if they ask you to keep your distance or prefer to do things via email or text message, please understand that.
Important information there from Marty Colbert, who is a crop loss assessor, and he was speaking with Angus Verley about a lot of the ins and outs of especially claiming insurance after damage like this, but the damage itself, and it seems fairly widespread over different areas of Victoria. Adrian from Bendigo has sent a photo in of looking out from the front porch, and yeah, it looks like a winter wonderland, doesn't it, Adrian? But I'm imagining it's a lot more destructive than that, but just, you know, white coverage really over the floor, over the ground between the trees and the equipment at Adrian's place. Quite incredible to see. Another text is suggesting here some crop are 100% totaled in the Millewa with hail the size of cricket balls. Now, I usually hear a lot about the golf balls. When we're getting up to cricket balls, that's well, getting really serious, doesn't it? Thank you very much for that text. And if you have a photo or so, send it through. Yeah, it'd be good for us to see. 0467 842 722. Simon Finlayson, who we spoke to earlier on in the program, took the video with that incredible sound of the hail, starting in Victoria and hitting his hay shed roof, has sent through a bit of an update as well, a couple of photos saying there's definitely a bit of wheat damage, roughly counting 75 to 100 grains per square metre on the ground. And he sent a couple of photos, one of the green heads of the standing crop that you can just see in areas have been absolutely smashed open or smashed apart, really, with bits missing and so forth as the hails come through. And then there's a shot looking at the ground and you see sort of the stalks of the standing plants parting each side and the black soil on the ground there with just flecks of bright green. It's wheat grains and parts of wheat plants, and yeah, there's a lot more there than I think I was even expecting to see as well. So a bit of damage in Simon's wheat crop there, which is not great to find. And I think many of you will be out looking at the same in different areas of Victoria today. We certainly feel for you, but you can always keep us updated. Send a text 0467 842 722. If you need a break from hearing about hail and storm damage, we're going to talk stinky fruit in our rural muster later on in the program. Also records, many more records happening in cattle prices, particularly around the country this week. We'll take you through some of those numbers as well. Before we get there, though, let's head to the regional newsroom and find out what's making regional news. Sarah Lawrence is there for us again today. Good afternoon, Sarah.
Good afternoon, Warwick. As wild weather continues to lash Victoria, the SES received 26 requests for assistance across the northeast region overnight. Seymour was among the hardest hit, with incidents including trees down, traffic hazards and some building damage. There were also widespread power outages across the region, including at Euroa, Violettown, Nagambie and Echuca. There has also been 71 requests for assistance in the northwest region, including 15 in Bendigo. The SES reports 54 calls have been for trees down and 13 for building damage. While there's been more than 65 requests for assistance in the Grampians, Powercorps says more than 100,000 people across the state are currently without power, including more than 2,000 customers in Ararat. Spokesman Emma Tina says some outages could last several days. Police are searching for a man who escaped from hotel quarantine in Albury. 19-year-old Kyle Creighton left the Wagga Road Hotel at around 3 o'clock yesterday morning. He's Caucasian in appearance and has a thin build and green hazel eyes. He's known to frequent Albury-Wodonga. Anyone with information should contact Crime Stoppers. The government says there will be no reductions in staffing levels at Wimmera hospitals after it long approved an anticipated merger that takes effect from Monday. Health Minister Martin Foley has given his approval for the Ballarat, Horsham, Dimboola, Eden Hope and Stawell hospitals to amalgamate and will now be known as Grampians Health. And a pilot program of rapid antigen home testing kits will begin in Albury from next week, aiming to reduce disruption at schools and halve the time close contacts need to isolate. Kits will be distributed at schools for use at home by staff and students twice a week. Unvaccinated students who are close contacts of a positive case will also be able to reduce their isolation time to 7 days by using the kits on a daily basis. For more news anytime, you can visit abc.net.au/news.
Thanks, Sarah. Sarah Lawrence there with regional news headlines.
On ABC Radio Victoria, you're with Warwick Long for the Victorian Country Hour.
Now I have a little bit of sad news to update you on right now just before we head to the Weather Bureau today. I know many of you would know through the exploits of regular texter to the Country Hour, Steve from Yalka. We've done a broadcast from Steve's place and he had a little dog called Billy the Dachshund. In fact, he sent a text about Billy yesterday. I've known him for many years. I think it was the first bit of viral content we ever had from the Country Hour many years ago on Facebook was a video of Billy the Dachshund rounding up cattle, and it went out, I think over 1 million people ended up watching this video. And he was a great little, stylish little dachshund. They had a little sausage dog running after all the cattle, making sure the dairy cattle were getting in. Steve's not even a dairy farmer anymore, but Billy still accompanied him in the tractor to do a lot of farm work and so forth. And often on the Country Hour, we'd get regular texts from Steve on whatever the topic of the day was with a little photo of Billy hard at work, either in the tractor cab or out in the paddocks, looking on, doing his best farm dog. Oh, I won't say impersonation. He really was a farm dog. And I say he was because even after yesterday's photo of Billy in the tractor cab that got sent through, Christy, Steve's wife, has sent through a message to us to say he was bitten by a snake yesterday afternoon, and our favourite little dachshund that was known for rounding up cattle didn't make it. And she told us that this morning that, Billy didn't make it through. So I just wanted to let you all know our favourite little working dog here at the Country Hour that really went around the world when a video of him looking after and rounding up dairy cattle and bringing them in, got bitten by a snake yesterday afternoon and hasn't made it. He's died. So look after your dogs, especially in this season when snakes are starting coming out. And best wishes to you today, Steve. I hope you're doing okay, especially after losing a close mate like that. We'll go to the Weather Bureau now. Sorry to go to Weather Bureau on such a sad note. On the Country Hour now, where it's 25 to 1, it's hard to sort of move away easily from anything like that. So I might even go back to a little bit of the video of the hail that came through. We spent so much time talking to Mark Anilak about the weather that was about to hit Victoria yesterday. It eventuated. Here's a little bit of that video from Simon Finlayson as the hail hit Victoria yesterday.
Here it comes.
It was serious stuff, and Mark Anilak can join us for the Bureau to find out if we're ever going to experience anything like that again in the next forecast period. Mark, welcome back to the Country Hour.
Thanks. I certainly hope not. That sounded like gunshots more than small hail running through, but yeah, that was quite impressive.
Incredible, wasn't it? We've sort of had it all in the last, in 24 hours since we last spoke to you. It was huge winds, hail, and a number of sort of wild weather reports from all corners of Victoria.
Yeah, and it's still continuing in one corner of Victoria. We've still got, not the thunderstorms and the hail, thankfully, but they're pretty much gone. But we do still have a severe weather warning out for damaging winds across the sort of the south-southeast corner of the state. At the moment, northerly winds reaching sort of in excess of 90 kilometres, gusting to 90 kilometres an hour, sort of affecting areas of sort of the East Gippsland area and Alpine region, and the very strong west to southwesterly winds that moved through Melbourne earlier this morning have now made their way out towards west and south Gippsland, and we're seeing Yarram Airport's just reported a gust to 100 kilometres now. East Sale has got sort of up around the 113, sort of 111 kilometre an hour winds a couple of hours ago, and so it's certainly moved out towards the Gippsland area. So for the rest of the state, conditions are easing, albeit quite slowly. We still have some shower activity on and south of the ranges. Showers will continue to ease during the day, and the winds are easing from the north and west during the afternoon as well. So conditions are on the ease as this low-pressure system moves away, but for the moment we still have some very strong winds affecting communities in the southeast of our state, Warwick.
So I suppose then as this moves on, how long is it going to hang around for those areas?
I'd probably say we've probably got a couple of hours left in it, but it'll contract from the north and west during the afternoon and probably confine to pretty much the Gippsland coasts later this afternoon and then clearing up early evening. So we've still got several hours, particularly for those over the Gippsland coast. They've got several hours of very strong windy conditions still to come. So, so still a few hours to go.
And, moving on from there, what are we likely to expect? Is it calming down, Mark?
It is, thankfully. We have a high-pressure system moving in from the west and a ridge of high-pressure system moving in from the west for the weekend. So fining trend through the weekend, and looks like we'll see an end to showers probably by early hours of Sunday morning. The showers will pretty much clear from southern parts of the state, leaving us with a fine afternoon Sunday. Monday, Tuesday, the winds turn east, northeasterly and northerly by Tuesday, so temperatures will gradually rise right across the state for Tuesday. And just a bit of a heads up for the people out in the land who don't want rain. Middle of next week, we look like we're seeing another system moving across the state. So keep an eye on the weather for the middle part of next week. There looks like there could be another rain band moving through, and a bit of a heads up on that.
I suppose then sort of, weekend, fine weather, Cup Day, fine weather, temperatures, what are we expecting?
Yeah, moving across the weekend, still quite cool to start with on Saturday with southerly winds still sort of bringing cool conditions to the state. But as we move through to Monday and Tuesday, we're more likely to see temperatures getting back up into the mid-20s again through much of the state. So looking much warmer for the middle part of, for sort of the latter part of our, what would we say, extended long weekend or pseudo-long weekend, I guess you could say.
Yeah, well, a lot of people take it, I suppose. We will be here.
It's a bit of a funny one, isn't it?
Country Hour still here on Monday and Tuesday.
Yeah,
don't worry about that.
The Weather Bureau is still operating all weekend, so yeah.
So any warnings expected for the rest of today or into the weekend?
No, thankfully we're in an easing trend, so we still have our severe weather warning, and that will continue for southeastern parts of the state through this afternoon. But we do have quite a number of marine warnings out as well, quite a lot of wind around that low. So we do have storm to gale-forced winds on much of our coasts, but they will gradually ease over the next 24 hours.
Fantastic. Anything else before we let you go, Mark?
No, and keep enjoying the video of the hail, because I'm hoping we don't see too much of that too often.
Yeah, that makes two of us. Thanks very much for the update.
Cheers, see ya.
Mark Analak, Senior Forecaster at the Bureau of Meteorology, taking you through the forecast. He's had a few duties with us this week. It's been great to have Mark across the week. You're listening to The Country Hour. It is 20 to 1. Just before we head to the rural muster, there is some other news, particularly for dairy farmers. We've had 2 step-ups in the last 24 hours too, not only the wild weather, but some step-ups in milk prices too, not easily comparable by the notes that have come out from each company. But Fonterra, we'll start with Saputo actually. Saputo went first yesterday afternoon, announcing a step-up of 7 cents per kilogram for butterfat, 14 cents per kilogram for protein. That was announced late yesterday afternoon. Then today, Fonterra have joined and followed suit. They've gone to $7.10 per kilogram of milk solids, so slightly different sort of metrics there in their announcements, but both companies lifting farm gate milk prices over the last 24 hours. If you'd like to give your feedback on that, if you're a dairy farmer, send us a text 0467 842 722 to send a text to the Country Hour. Let's head to the rural muster now on the Country Hour. A roundup of stories from the week in rural that we haven't been able to bring you in full. Kelly Lazaro is bringing you the muster today. It's got mangoes, it's got stinky fruit, it's got its all. Take us through it, Kelly.
Oh, we've got heaps today, We'll go to the fisheries off the Northern Territory. We'll check in with an almond grower in WA. We'll see how the mango season is shaping up in Queensland. And there are 2 huge parcels of land in New South Wales that have been bought to be turned into national parks. But first, let's start overseas and head to the UK, where it is tough to be a farmer right now. Farm labour, fertiliser, fuel and agricultural chemicals are all in short supply. There are reports pigs have been slaughtered due to a lack of butchers, and fertiliser plants have closed due to soaring gas prices. UK agricultural journalist Ruth Wills says the lack of visas post-Brexit has caused major issues for farmers needing workers.
So it's not just the pig industry that has been hit by the lack of labour. The horticulture and the dairy industries have been hit too. The NFU, together with various associations, have been lobbying hard, and there seems to be a small amount of optimism growing.
The vast majority of Australia's wool kit goes to China, but it's London where the industry's peak body will set up a much-hyped new marketing post. Stuart McCulloch was the long-time head of Australian wool innovation until he shocked the industry earlier this month by taking a lesser position as marketing chief. Now it's been revealed he's likely to base himself in London, despite most of Australia's wool exports going to China on the other side of the world. Jock Laurie is the chairman of AWI, and he explained the thinking at a Senate estimates hearing during the week.
That we've got to strengthen our stakeholder stuff, and that allows that to happen, and we've got to be in a position where we're driving the market. So he doesn't have the title of CEO anymore. He's got a title of a sort of marketing and product development minister. He doesn't have the same package that he had before. He has a reduced package.
The Australian Fisheries Management Authority says there's been a surge in illegal fishing boats coming into Australia's northern waters. More than 100 vessels have been intercepted in the last 3 months. For commercial fishers who work near the Australian Fishing Zone border, they say the spike in foreign boats has been noticeable. While unloading fish at Darwin, skipper Billy Barker says he saw 5 illegal vessels during his last trip, and it's an issue that needs addressing.
When we see them in Australian waters, we pretty much steam towards them, and they will usually pretty quickly pull their lines up and start heading back into Indonesia. You know, we don't obviously want any conflict with them, but simply by heading in their direction, usually that's enough to get them to pack up and go back over the line. It's an issue because it's our resource firstly, but we have to spend quite a bit of time now chasing them around and, you know, taking their marks and relaying that to the border force. And it's just the fact that they don't seem concerned about the fact that they're doing the wrong thing and being seen doing the wrong thing anymore. They just don't seem to mind.
Some big money has been spent by the New South Wales government this week with the purchase of a number of large stations near Broken Hill and Ivanhoe in the far west of the state. They'll be handed over to New South Wales National Parks for conservation work before becoming national parks. The total amount of money spent hasn't been disclosed, but it's understood to be in the tens of millions of dollars. Atticus Fleming is the Deputy Secretary of the National Parks and Wildlife Service and says both properties are significant because they contain habitats and ecosystems that aren't found in other national parks in the state.
We want to protect the environment up there with the wildlife, the heritage, but we also want these acquisitions to be really important for the local community and the local economy. So, they've got to be well managed, we've got to be good neighbours, but everywhere in the state, where you've got good visitor programs, our national parks are generating big contributions to the local economy.
Now to almonds, and the effects of drought-breaking rain in California may be felt all the way here. In recent months, the almond industry has witnessed one of the quickest price rebounds ever seen due to an unexpected shortfall in US production. Rick Ensley runs Western Australia's only commercial almond farm, a small 4.5 hectare orchard near Margaret River. He says it's tiny compared with the gigantic operations in California where he's from, but this season's crop could be his best ever.
We had a light crop last year, a couple possible reasons, but we had great pollination, did some boron for pollen germination, and they have an excellent crop on them. In fact, they might have too much in terms of their ability to grow and bear well next year, but we'll see.
Now let's talk fruit for a bit and start with mangoes. If you're a fan of the Kensington Pride or Bowen mangoes, you might have trouble finding them in the supermarket this summer. And that's because things haven't gone to plan for the North Queensland growers of the variety because of a warmer winter. Grower Peter Lafleur says his Kensington trees didn't flower this year and the crop is looking dismal.
The crop that we'll pick before Christmas, we think, is about 20% of last year's crop, which was probably a little bit above average. When there's not as much fruit, we pack more trays as a percentage-wise, so we'll drop from maybe 160,000 trays last year to possibly, 60,000 this year.
And now to a lesser-known fruit, fresh durians, which are regarded as the stinkiest fruit in the world. The Southeast Asian fruit has a hard shell that's cracked open for the yellow flesh inside. Durians are getting picked in the top end of the Northern Territory at the moment, and grower Han Shang-Sia says a warm, humid, dry season has resulted in strong yields.
The smell, they describe it as stinky socks and old garlic. It depends. Some people love it, some people hate it. And then the texture is something very different. It's like a blend between baby food and custard, I guess, with a little bit of hint of onion.
I'm sorry, Han, you're not really selling the durians for me. That's it for this week's Rural Muster. Thanks, Woz.
Yeah, I don't think I need one either. Thanks, Cal. Durian, the stinkiest fruit on the market. Go and take it on if you're brave enough. Let's talk some records here on the Country Hour. The cattle industry broke all kinds of records this week with huge money being forked out across the supply chain. Get this, the eastern and western young cattle indicators reached new records. The feeder steer and medium cow indicators also broke new records this week. So what's going on? Matt Brand spoke to MLA's senior market analyst, Stuart Bull.
What we saw across both the eastern states and in Western Australia was a significant influx of young cattle coming online. And not just young cattle, but also cattle desirable for feedlots and also processors. But particularly when we talk about the Eckie, we saw an extra 3,000 to 4,000 head pop up week on week. And despite that, demand hasn't waned and prices actually continue to soar into record levels. We saw the Eckie hit 1,076 cents per kilogram carcass weight. So a big influx in cattle. I think it's a bit of a perfect storm of factors at the moment, with rain falling steadily across key supply regions. The outlook looks pretty positive, particularly for the next week. It looks like the majority of the country is to experience some form of rainfall. And also just heading into spring, Matt, it's really warming up in certain places, and we're seeing more weaner type cattle coming online with decent finish and good quality. Desirable for backgrounders and feedlots.
When the Eckie hit 900 cents earlier in the year, people were using the term drunk on grass. What do you call 1,075?
Probably high on something. Next level. Yeah. The fact that the Eki could potentially hit 1,100 cents is phenomenal, no doubt. And the Wiki has completely surpassed that with hitting 1,187 cents yesterday. And it just goes to show, I think, more the strength of demand currently as we head into closing into Christmas. We expected a few more cattle to be coming online, and yet prices have just gone from strength to strength. It just highlights how strong demand is. And again, we'll see things generally quieten down a bit as we head into Christmas, but certainly, still strong signs ahead for sure.
The restockers are obviously confident, but let's talk about the processors, because the National Medium Cow Indicator also hit a record high this week.
It did. So, we're seeing records across the board, not just young cattle, but the feeder steer hit a new record. And then we talk about the medium cow, particularly the medium cow caters to processors, as you mentioned. So, again, these are cows coming off grass at around that kind of medium spec, usually destined for certain export markets, but also for the domestic trade. So, a lot of demand still from processors trying to acquire lines of cattle. As we know, supply has been very tight, particularly for young cattle and cows, because obviously with the drought breaking, they just haven't been there. So, obviously we've just seen strength to strength across the supply chain, with margins increasingly getting tighter the further down that you go.
What's your take on people forking out more than $1,600 to buy a lightweight steer at Roma in terms of being able to make a profit down the line?
Well, it just depends on what the market does. From my analysis and calculations, assuming that the input costs are down because of the levels of feed and also with cropping coming online for the feeder job, there's still margins to be made. They're not going to be huge. But if the market continues on its trend, then you're in good pastures, so to speak. But, I think for the market to correct, 10 to 15%, certainly there'd be some concerns for some producers, no doubt, if that was to happen.
That's Senior Market Analyst with Meat and Livestock Australia, Stuart Bull speaking there. You're listening to The Country. Incredible prices continuing in the cattle industry. We'll keep an eye on it. Feels like we're talking about new records nearly every week at the moment there, aren't we? But let's move on to some important work that's about to be undertaken, where Indigenous rangers are attempting to eradicate a sea of wheel cactus across more than 1,000 acres at Buckrabanyal in north-central Victoria. The conservation not-for-profit group Bush Heritage Australia purchased the property earlier this year and has partnered with the Dja Dja Wurrung Clan's Aboriginal Corporation to manage it. Wheel cactus is a highly invasive plant that is classified as a weed of national significance. We've talked about it before on the Country Hour, and especially in that region, it sounds, particularly troubling. Bush Heritage Chief Executive Heather Campbell says Mount Buckrabanyal holds special meaning to Indigenous people.
This property is really important for two reasons. One is really important to Dja, as far as being the home of Mindy and the Great Serpent, and therefore a really important cultural site. And we've been working with Dja Dja Wurrung for over 10 years now, working together, jointly caring for land across that sort of area. The other reason, too, for the importance of this site is that it's got a lot of wheel cactus. And we've spent a lot of time on our Ngadu Hills Reserve dealing with wheel cactus year in, year out. But, that can be never ending unless we deal with where, the problem starts from. And this is a significant contributor in the whole area to the wheel cactus problem, not just for us, but for all landholders in the area.
Now, wheel cactus is a major problem, as you said, on this site and on surrounding properties. For those who may not have seen pictures, can you paint me a picture of just how severe that problem is?
Look, certainly. And for anybody who's up in that area, you'll be able to see it because it is a sea of green. And from a distance, you sort of go, oh, that's great. Must be a great crop growing there. And as you get closer and then you drive around, it is just cactus after cactus after cactus. So there's very little of that property which does not have a wheel cactus problem. But what is fantastic is the crews from Dja, in conjunction with ourselves, are doing a fantastic job going, okay, let's get in there, let's get stuck in and deal with this and trial different methods to manage that cactus and remove it off the property.
So probably early days, but has any progress been made?
Look, it is early days. The team have been doing some trials in relationship to mulching to see if that can be a technique that could be used. We're also doing the standard process of injecting with chemicals, but looking at different chemicals that may be more effective than others. But it is a long, hard job. Although I have talked to some of our volunteers who are doing this work on Ngāru Hills, there's almost a little bit of pleasure in stabbing a cactus with chemical and going, right, I've got rid of you, now on to the next one and on to the next one. So it is slow, it's early days, but we know that if collectively we put that effort in, we can actually manage it.
And given that it is so labour intensive, injecting every single wheel with chemical, I assume that in terms of what one person could do in one day, we're talking, measuring it in square metres.
That's why it's really important that we do the trials such as mulching and looking at other techniques where we can do a lot bigger areas. So what's going to be really important here is this will become a bit of a trial site to look at different techniques that will then be really important for all the landholders as they deal with wheel cactus. And I'm sure if we put our collective brains to it, we can come up with different techniques. But at the moment, it is fairly labour intensive.
There is a perception, perhaps unfair, that organisations like your own may buy a property, lock the gates, and then feral animal and weeds become a problem. Feel free to comment on that. But also, in this case, I guess you're buying the problem already.
Yeah, look, I know there might be that perception, but our day-to-day for our reserve managers, our project officers, on all of our reserves around the country is focused on weeds and feral animals and fire management. And so we actively manage. So we don't just, lock the gate and walk away. We are actively managing the weeds and the feral animals day in, day out, because we know that's the only way that we'll actually get a glorious environment and the biodiversity that will tip things in favour of our native species. So we're an active land manager.
How much land does Bush Heritage have across the country all up?
So we own a bit over 1 million hectares of land in very different environments, areas such as Victoria, down to our original properties in the Liffey Valley of Tasmania through to desert properties in the Simpson.
And that is a lot of land worth a lot of money. Where does the money come from, both to purchase the land and then to pay for its management?
We are really fortunate to have an amazing bunch of supporters. So we have around 48,000 active donors and supporters who provide us with that funding to do that work. So roughly 90% of our funding comes from individuals, foundations, different trusts. It's philanthropic in nature.
That is Bush Heritage Australia Chief Executive Heather Campbell speaking there to Angus Fairley. Enough time for our final market of the week here on the Country Hour. It is the Swan Hill and Oyen lambs. Here's Jenny Kelly.
Good afternoon. Cheaper prices hit the market at Oyen and Swan Hill yesterday. Quality was partly the problem, with the 10,000 lambs at Oyen and 4,000 at Swan Hill lacking bloom. These are the last sales in the Mallee for this season, and these sale yards will now shut until February, when selling recommences on shorn lambs. A lot of lambs were $10 to $20 cheaper yesterday, bringing the best heavy suckers down to 800 to 850 cents, while plainer lambs were estimated at 750 to 800 cents a kilo carcass weight. There was reduced competition from processors. A few pens of heavy suckers sold from $220 to a top of $238 at Swan Hill, while Oyen posted a top of just $215 and was probably the toughest sale on the day. There was a lot of mixed domestic weighted sucker lambs in the 20 to 24 kilo range, which varied from $170 to $200 a head. Store lambs held their value better, with the better type still making $130 to $170 to the paddock. Sheep sold okay, with the better lines of merino ewes from $550 to 620 cents a kilo. Most trade in heavy sheep from $140 to $200, with just isolated sales above this to a top of $228. Jenny Kelly for MLA.
Thanks very much for that, Jenny. That's about all the time we have for you on the Country Hour this week on the text line. Just a final word from the text line. This person from ex-North Queensland informs us that durians are the best. It's like fragrant custard. Yeah, you can keep that one to yourself, I think. Thank you very much for the text anyway. As always, if you can't wait for the Country Hour on Monday to return, you can always listen back to any program in our podcast. Just search Victorian Country Hour wherever you get podcasts, or head to our website, abc.net.au/rural, where you can read about Hazeldene's, the large chicken producer, being sold right now, or even the free water going to irrigators this month. That's all online right now for you to read. I'll catch you on Monday. It's 1 o'clock.